A lot of happy days. Happy Walker Bueller Day. He makes his return to the bump, first time in 22 months at home against the Miami Marlins. Happy Mason Black Day. He makes his major league debut in Philly against Zach Wheeler. Welcome to the show. Happy Kyle Manzardo Day. Sad news. Quan goes on the IL. Looks like it'll be a couple weeks, but Manzardo is the corresponding move that gets the bump from AAA Columbus for the Guardians. And happy belated Christian Bethancourt multi-hit day. He was 0-26. I think that was the low point, Arm Layton. You're chilling in, I think, your living room of your apartment. Is that where you were for that Christian Bethancourt day?
I actually was. I haven't moved, and ironically now I'm still here for those who are watching on YouTube and like, what's that backdrop there? The Wi-Fi just continuing to crush me here in this apartment in my final months here. So gonna try to figure that out. We're gonna sort that out. But in the meantime, I might just be recording from random spots in my apartment. So if you catch that, but also if you can hear my voice, pretty under the weather. So sorry if this is not my best podcast of all time, but I'm going to try my best. We're going to try to push through it. Maybe we can have a little bit of a flu game here, but I love the topics, which makes it so much worse because I wish I was feeling better for
Yeah.
these topics, but you never know. Sometimes maybe that's when some of the best conversation comes out, but I can tell you, I was sitting on the couch, feeling pretty cloudy headed and everything. And I saw Betancourt flash on the screen. I saw two hits, like 2 for 3 with whatever it was. And then I saw the batting average at 071. And I was like, oh, they must have not updated that yet, right? Like it must
No.
just be, an input error. But no. That's what he brought it up to. So I'm happy for him. I mean, it's got to be tough to be in that kind of stretch. Like he wasn't a great hitter last year, but I mean, that's different level of struggle to open up the year.
We know that the Rays really never care about catcher production offensively. Like they kind of go through a turnstile when it comes to catchers, and they want a guy to handle the staff, whatever the staff may look like. Who blows out, whoever's on the hill, that guy's going to catch him. And like it doesn't matter to them. Christian Bethancourt was that guy. Francisco Mejia was also that guy. And now we're looking at two guys that are really struggling to hold on to an everyday job when they go elsewhere. I think we just kind of ignore the catching position in Tampa and say, like, oh, it's whatever. And when Zanino had that one good year, we're like, oh, the Rays are a cheat code now. They have a catcher that's a real player.
It's funny how that works too, because you'd think like the way that they're driven, they'd be able to just lean into another Zanino somewhere, right? A guy
Yeah.
that can frame and hit bombs, and you don't care if he hits, a buck 80 or 200. But for whatever reason, that just seems to not be a position that they can fill, and they still seem to be fine without it. But you do wonder, like when there's stretches like this where the offense is not as I would say potent as we've seen it in the past. I know they've been playing a little bit better lately, but if you have those stretches, I feel like you really feel it when you have a catcher like that, because we talk about how eliminating the DH is, and I feel like this is really disrespectful, but eliminating the DH is like, nice because you don't have the auto out at the bottom of the order. It's better than that, but at the same time, if you have a catcher that's really struggling, and there's been stretches where Rays catchers are, I mean, the bottom of the league, that really hurts you because the other eight guys, if they're struggling a bit, it's an auto out at number 9. So it kind of takes you back to the pitching era where you have those guys hitting, because that's the one thing is I feel like it's really hard to find well-rounded catchers, but at the same time, like the Rays just, I don't know. How are they so good at everything else? They can't just find someone a little bit better than what they normally put in there.
No idea. But you know what? The Marlins gave it a go with Christian Bethancourt, and it just didn't really work. Marlins gave it a go with Luis Arraez. It worked in 2023. By the way, brought to you by the fine folks at BetMGM. You know that. You always know that. You hear it off the top of the pod. Ray's catching tandem was not on the list of topics. Luis Arraez is the leading topic on this show. Luis Arraez goes from the Marlins to the Padres for Woo-Suk Go, who was signed out of the KBO, 25-year-old that was in Double A. Is he going to Double or Triple A with the Marlins?
Triple.
He's going to Jacksonville. Okay. But the big thing, Dylan Head, who is a top 100 prospect for Just Baseball, I think number 88, first round pick last year, the Padres, outfielder that can absolutely fly. And then two guys that you like that were inside the top 10 Padres prospects, which is linked in the episode description, Jacob Marcy, an outfielder, and Nathan Martorella, a first baseman. There's a lot of different avenues that we can go with this. I want to wrap with the return to Miami.
Okay.
Big picture, Luis Arraez going from Miami to San Diego. Let's start with the San Diego perspective because they just got a lot better, and they've got a lot of big money guys. that were somewhat slow out of the gates. Xander Bogaerts was very slow out of the gates. Tatis is a bit slower out of the gates than you would hope he would be. Machado, I mean, wasn't playing third base for the first couple of weeks. They got a shot in the ass at the top of their lineup, man. And this makes them objectively better. And wouldn't you know it, AJ Preller's at it again.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a perfect fit, and that's why I think Luis Arraez is such a nice piece for a team that is kind of missing that one dimension for them that really just hasn't been there at the top of their order. And I feel like you could definitely say that with the Padres, where they just haven't had that consistent contact oriented guy at the top of the order to put some pressure. Merrill was that in the beginning of the year, but that's a lot to expect of a rookie to be that table setter contact guy.
Yeah.
You should have him at the bottom of the order where he's comfortable, and that's
Lineup
where he should
extender.
stay.
You want a lineup
Exactly.
extender. Yeah.
For now, and eventually he'll be in a better spot. But Arraez is that proven guy that, I think he's almost protecting Tatis and Machado, and you're hoping Bogaerts, when he starts to swing it better, in
Yeah.
front of them, because he gets on base so frequently that you got to go pitch to those guys now. And I think the idea of Tatis not maybe hitting as much as you were hoping out of the gate, the power is still there. He's going to run into his homers. He's still slugging right around 450 right now, and that's during a slow start. So you probably want him, maybe not in the leadoff spot now, and in a position to maybe drive in some more runs. And so I think it just allows them to mix and match in so many different ways. And then the other side of it is, Arraez's big, I guess, subtraction has been the defensive utility or lack thereof. They don't really need him to do anything. He can pretty much DH most of the time and play a little bit of first or second when, they need someone to fill in there. But I do think he's also a good insurance policy in case the team can't pay Ha-Seong Kim when he goes to free agency potentially this year. We're seeing how tight money is for them, unfortunately, in San Diego. So I feel like they might know that Ha-Seong Kim's probably going to walk, and now they've got a backup plan for next year with 2 years of control of Arraez. So I think it helps them now, and it also helps them next year in case they are not able to keep Kim.
If I have the information right, San Diego is going to take on the entirety of ARB 3, but ARB 2 has been taken care of by the Miami Marlins. A unique wrinkle into this is for the Marlins to get the return that they got. And again, we're going to hit on that return here in a moment. But for them to get the return that they got, they took a page out of the Mets book where they paid down a salary. Now, it's not Verlander and Scherzer's 40. It's Arraez's, 10 that he was owed this year? It might have been 8 to 10. They paid it down to the league minimum. So San Diego now owes Luis Arraez the league minimum this year, which is the best of both worlds, I think.
And not only that, the Marlins took on a multi-million-dollar contract with Woo-Suk Go, who they had struggle in spring training this year. He's owed, I think, 1 point something this year, and then I know it's more than 2 million next year, with a mutual option in the third year that has a buyout for 500,000. So they're able to dump that too. And I think, every dollar does matter right now as the Padres try to keep the team together, but operate within the margins, as we've been talking about with we're seeing a different Preller now that is refreshing and fun to see how he can kind of operate between the margins. And I just think it's a really interesting exchange when you feel like the Marlins had to add the money when you look at it in a vacuum. But at the same time, Arraez is limited positionally. I don't think there was a lot of teams knocking on their door. The return is pretty good, and we're going to get into that. And on top of that, like if Bendix thought this was one of the better offers they were going to get, Arraez comes with some injury concerns. He's played through it, but if he gets hurt, you're going to really kick yourself that you didn't take that early, really good offer. Like in real estate, I feel like they tell you a lot of times the first offer is the best one.
Right.
And I think Bendix, knowing the way that a lot of those guys in Tampa operate, I wouldn't be surprised if they operate that way sometimes with trades too, because they do often treat it like a financial institution.
100%. Yeah. And the other thing that we were kind of texting about back and forth this weekend is Luis Arraez might have met his WAR cap last year. Like at Luis Arraez's best, he's winning the batting title. Okay, that's great. Ton of national intrigue on that. Ton of fans that you make around the world. I love watching Luis Arraez hit. But at the end of the day, this guy won a batting title and he was a 3.5 win player. When you hear batting title, when you hear what maybe the best pure hitter of this generation, right? Like, oh, this generation's Tony Gwynn. Okay. What does that mean? Like, I think a lot of people instinctively go to, oh, that means he's a 5 win player. He's one of the best players in all of baseball. No, because he's so defensively limited, because there's really no power output, you're looking at a guy that really caps at a 3.5 win player. He was a 3.5 win player a year ago. And you know what? If he gets back to that, that means he probably has another batting title under his belt.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a guy that puts you over the top. I think if you're a team like the Padres potentially and you're clicking on all cylinders, that's a guy that can really, I think tie the bow on things. But if you're a mediocre to bad offense like the Marlins, and you're also in a position where you have to look at how few assets you have, and we'll get into like the larger Marlins scope. But I feel like you look at what you got there, you know that Arraez is only going to become less valuable the longer you hold on to him, given that he has one more year of control after this season.
Yeah.
And people might say, oh, well, the Marlins should have extended him. Yeah, and I hear that because there's the optic side of it, and optically it's a really tough trade
Yeah.
because they gave up fan favorite Pablo Lopez and added prospects for him. And then now, he becomes one of the fan favorites again. He's one of the heart and soul guy, glue guys of the clubhouse. And then you trade him, not even 18 months after, I think 16 months after, and after such a great season. So optically, it's really tough. But I think when you look at the franchise, they're the worst farm system, or at least one of the worst farm systems in Major League Baseball. Most of their most valuable assets are on the shelf right now. They're in a really tough spot, and Peter Bendix, I think is looking at a situation where he's got to cash in on his best assets and look at long-term success. Which, if you look at this team right now, they're not good now. And what's your plan to get better in the future? You don't have the prospects.
Yeah.
You don't have a very early draft pick this year because of your surprising success last season. Like, your hands are pretty tied, and I think that's the part that gets kind of overlooked, which I understand from fans because of just the frustration of here we go again with the Marlins. And it is, happening all over again.
For sure. Now, can I tell you what this trade told me about the Miami Marlins?
What?
They're going to have very minimal issue moving on from Jazz Chisholm and possibly moving on from an asset that I deem right now more valuable in Jesus Luzardo. I think Peter Bendix may look at this team and say that there are two untouchables, and they both have a brace on the right arm right now.
Yep,
Like,
exactly.
that's it. I think they may clean out. And I know that Bendix wanted to take time to assess the situation. And the fact that this deal, I think in his own words, and I don't have the quote right in front of me, but in his own words, were something along the lines of this deal was too good to pass up right now. Do you know the exact quote that I'm talking about?
It was pretty much that exactly.
Yeah, it was like too good to pass up.
Mhm.
If he's doing that after he already said that he had to take several months to assess, and it's like the beloved player in Miami, that tells you that this guy has no problem moving off of somebody who could be deemed a problem child in Jazz, and obviously an amazing person for the city of Miami and an amazing person for the Miami Marlins organization. But if Jesus Luzardo can get you a haul, Jesus Luzardo can get you a haul. And I feel like he is going to think long and hard about that. And he's not really afraid of the optics because he was hired to win a bunch of baseball games, not in 2024.
Yeah.
And if moving Luzardo gives him, in his opinion, the best opportunity to win a bunch of baseball games down the line, I think he's going to do it because
Mhm.
that's how he got a lead job. There are only 30 of these. You have to trust him.
Yeah. And that's also how he climbed the ranks in Tampa Bay. I think it's interesting that, I can understand being a little bit doubtful of just whether he's going to be able to duplicate what he did in Tampa and Peter Bendix, but he was very involved in that process. He was the general manager there. I know that there's other people involved, and the president of baseball operations
But
ultimately is calling the
yeah,
shots, but he's playing an integral part of that. That's how you climb up as an intern all the way up. Doesn't mean he could be the guy calling the shots, and it might, be a little bit of a disappointment at points. But there's no way that he's just going to take over and be clueless. And I can even speak to, the infrastructure aspect of what they're doing from a player development standpoint, from, just even the way that they're scouting, the way that they're evaluating players. Like, all of that has changed. I know players, like, for the first time in years, have like logins for like an actually decent system to be able to track their data and, like,
cool.
see things and get feedback. Like, there were some basic things that, Marlins player development were lacking when Jeter, was in charge. And I think if you want to have a gripe, you can have a gripe with the owner, because
Yeah.
the owner should have probably realized that this was the approach that he loved earlier. He's been infatuated with the Rays forever. I don't blame him. The motto is don't spend a lot and win a lot,
So
but
why,
that's
so why
really
don't you
hard to
hire
do.
from the Rays earlier? Yeah, like
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you should have realized that earlier, understood earlier. And I just don't think Bruce Sherman, when he bought the team, really understood how baseball, the whole landscape works on that deep of a level. And so the idea of, oh, Derek Jeter, of course, why would I not get one of the best players of all time, in this group to go? He's gonna, put us in a great spot. And I think a lot of people that have been around the game for a long time and been in front offices said, ooh, this will be interesting, right? And
yeah,
it was just that. So I think that's where you need to be frustrated. I think it's a lot of misdirected anger at Peter Bendix because I'll be honest, like I'm not qualified for it. But if you told me, hey, Aram, you're the general manager, the president of baseball operations for the Marlins, and you need to make this team sustainably good for the next 10 years, or you just need to win a World Series in the next 10 years. I would do exactly that. That would be one of my first moves, would be trading Luis Arraez, unfortunately, because there's no other path to being good. You're financially constrained, no matter what you want to say, you're going to
yep,
be. And you have one of the worst farm systems in Major League Baseball. It's going to take some time. And
yep.
now you just overhauled your player development system. Now you can add talent into there, and it might start to translate a little bit better. And I think that's what Bendix was, trying to do here. And think about it. Sherman's got to be bought in if he's going to give him $8 million for prospects. Bruce Sherman didn't want to spend $8 million on a player in free agency. The highest paid guy was Tim Anderson. So the
Yeah.
fact that Sherman's actually doing that shows that Bendix has sold him everything. Bendix has clearly convinced him everything. And so I'm just interested to see if it works out, but he's got the keys to the castle, that's for sure. And if I did it again. I joked on Twitter that, Castle's a little generous, but it's like probably what, like a 2 bedroom house or like an Airbnb.
It's a McMansion. It's like
Okay.
it's a nice 6 bed, 4 bath in like I don't know, Arlington suburbs. We're looking at Airbnbs in Arlington, Texas right now. Like Texas, you can get a pad for cheap. And I think that it's a cheap but great pad in Texas.
Yeah. Okay. I'll
So
take that.
Dallas suburbs. I'll take Dallas
Bendix has
suburbs.
the keys to
McMansion.
those.
Yeah, easy. No problem. Elevator pitch on the 4 guys that comes back. Um, Brutal news from Baseball Reference. We've been saying Woo Suck Go's name wrong.
Mm,
It's not Woo. It's Ooh. The W is silent. Ooh Suck Go.
that's 10 times better.
It's way better. What can you tell me about Ooh Suck Go, real quick?
It was a rough spring training for him. I think he was
Yeah.
6 innings, something like 13 hits. It
Was
was tough for him. And the fastball just was kind of right down the middle. The command
five
was just
innings,
not,
11 hits, niner.
yeah, I mean, just not great stuff. But he was signed for a reason. He was a closer in the KBO. He has a mid 90s heater and has some interesting breaking balls. The problem is he's owed a couple $1 million over the next couple years. So I think that's what made him expendable for the Padres. But for the Marlins, they're hoping maybe he can turn into a reliever piece, seventh inning guy, and you can flip him at the deadline or later on.
Yeah. Dylan Head is the number 88 prospect in baseball coming into the year by justbaseball.com. 21 games in Lake Elsinore so far. Not a great start, hitting
Yeah.
237 with a 317 OBP. He does have a homer. He's got 5 doubles and 2 triples. He's 3 for 7 in the stolen base department, which
Wow.
is weird. I don't know how you get caught 4 times when you are that ridiculously fast. But Dylan Head is a guy that can motor like very few can in minor league baseball. The guys in front of him are the ones that stole 90 backs last year in the minor leagues, in Victor Scott, in Chandler Simpson. You probably say Chorio is faster when you look at this top prospect list, but Head is right there. Head is a 70 runner. What are you hoping you see progress with the bat?
Yeah, I think just a little bit more patience. I think he's just still leaning into I have a great feel to hit and I can get to a lot of pitches and I'm going to beat everything out because as an amateur, I can guarantee you he could chop a ball at his eyes or swing at one that bounces. It could dribble into the infield and he's beating it, 9 times out of 10. So I think we've already seen that too. He's cut the chase down as the season's progressed a little bit. And that's just something that you'll see with speedy, good feel to hit guys all the time. But the Marlins haven't had a prospect like this in a while where it's plus speed and center field, a great glove, and just some offensive upside too. Like he's got the feel to hit, but there's some sneaky power there for a smaller guy, and I think there's a lot of upside to be. I think intrigued with if you're a Marlins fan because they haven't had a player like that. For me, he's instantly their best position player prospect.
You think over Victor Mesa Jr.?
Yes, I do, and I like Mesa Jr. a lot. But I think instantly with what Head can do, it's just the upside is just on a different level.
So when we update the top 100 list, I think there's going to be two arms in Meyer and Thomas White that are in the top 100. But
Mhm.
if the Marlins were going to have a third top 100 prospect, Dylan Head would be that guy. And as it stands
Yes.
right now, he's one of two.
Yes,
So
yeah, and even with the slower start, a lot of the underlying batted ball data looks good, and he's been hitting the ball pretty hard, when he is making contact, and so far the contact rates have been fine.
another center fielder off to a slow start. Jacob Marcy comes back. Marcy was really good in pitcher-friendly Fort Wayne last year. Marcy is a guy that I know you really liked at the Fall League
Hmm.
this past year. Marcy in 24 games in San Antonio hitting a buck 77, but he's walking a lot. 24 games, 19 walks. He's got a 336 OBP. He's 12 for 13 in the stolen base department. He's probably close to the big leagues. I know he's only played 40 games in Double A between last year and this year, but he seems like a guy, and I don't know if he's gotten his assignment yet. Has he? Did he
I
go
mean,
to Did he go to Pensacola or
I,
Jacksonville?
I'm pretty sure he went to Pensacola.
Okay, but like that's a guy that could be up by the end of the year.
I think very quickly, especially with their big league situation. Like, yeah, I think when you move another guy or two, it could make a lot of sense to see him up early. And Marcy, I mean, he was the Arizona Fall League MVP, so I got to see him out there when he was really doing his thing. It's above average speed, but he is so good on the base paths and just has such good instincts that he's an above average center fielder, and he's a guy that stole almost 50 bags last season. So you're getting a little bit of everything there. The power has continued to tick up a little bit. And the Padres are just so good at finding these guys. And I think IDing in the middle rounds. And yeah, they might have sold a little bit high given that Marcy's coming off of the AFL MVP. And I know he's off to a slow start if you look at the surface level
Yeah.
statistics, but there's another guy that has just been hitting the ball hard everywhere. And it's like a 207 BABIP, but you're not seeing him strike out. He's walking at a 17% clip. He's going to be fine. But he also, I think he's right behind Victor Mesa Jr. there, where you have another really solid center field prospect, whereas he was on an island just a few days ago.
Yeah. And Martorella is right there too. Nathan Martorella is a first baseman that can hold his own in the corners. For the most part, he plays first base, but he can pop into left, maybe right too. Fifth round pick in 2022. He was a Berkeley Bear. Martorella is a great fourth piece in this deal.
Oh man. I mean, he is off to as good of a start as really anybody in that organization was. And I know he's cooled off a little bit of late, but I mean, still in Double A to get off to the start that he has, as he's getting used to the level, like I think it's pretty impressive. But the other thing too is the batted ball data last year was also like pretty impressive from an exit velocity standpoint. I think it was 105.5 mile per hour, 90th percentile, which it would be one of the better figures in the Marlins org. And now, I think you're seeing him start to elevate more. This could be, a nice power bat for the Marlins, and definitely is one of their better left-handed hitters in the system now too.
I will let you have the final word here, but if I were to deliver a message to Marlins fans, Padres fans, you got better. Like, full stop, you got better. You traded a bunch of guys. That's what AJ Preller does. Like, this shouldn't be anything new, and you got better with maybe the best pure hitter that we've got in Major League Baseball right now. My message to Marlins fans would be it's okay to be pissed. I
Hmm.
totally get it. In the grand scheme, like optically, this sucks. And if you're
Hmm.
a Marlins fan, this sucks. And I'm sorry. But you can't immediately chalk this up as a bad deal. This was a really good return for a guy that is not necessarily going to be flirting with MVP votes.
Yeah.
This is a guy that, could hit 340 and he's not going to finish in the top 10 of MVP voting just because the value is not really there. Limited defensively, like we said, this was a good return. You can be pissed right now, but know that this guy is looking out for you. Peter Bendix did not come to commit arson on the Miami Marlins.
No, no, and he was in a pretty decent spot. I think he really wanted to prove that he can do it, and we'll see if he can. But I think it's silly to judge him now because of the people that have failed before him. And I think he deserves an opportunity to try to build this thing up, as you said. The other thing that's interesting with the Arraez situation is, they're not going to pay many guys. He's going to command a decent amount of money. And how soon is this team going to be good? Because Arraez is a guy that already has had some issues with his knees. We talk about some of the injury concerns. probably not really good at second base at all. One of the worst defenders at that position. Probably trending closer to that first base DH role. And then when you start looking at the landscape of Major League Baseball, there's a lot of teams where you could argue Arraez is not quite an upgrade for them in that first base slash DH role. Maybe one of the two he could be,
Yeah.
but a lot of teams aren't going to just fork over a ton of money for that type. It's hard. I mean, look at JD Martinez barely
Right.
getting signed until later now. Like that, it's just a tough
13.
profile. Jorge Soler, we thought would have way more of a market. Like and I know those are totally different players, but I'm just saying once the defensive utility, starts to go to the wayside, that the value really tapers off, and teams don't really want to give up nearly as much. So kind of knowing that that's a depreciating asset.
And then it's like, what's your flavor too? In the DH position, a lot of teams really like the guys that are going to punch out a bit, but could flirt with 30 homers. So
Yeah.
it really depends. Hey, does he fit the template of the guy that you want of the defensively limited? So yeah, I think this was good deal for both sides right now until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
Jumping to another South Florida conversation. Christian Scott debuted in Tampa for the New York Mets. Christian Scott, 6 2/3, 5 hits, 1 run, 6 Ks, and 1 walk. No decision in his MLB debut, but doing this to the Rays. I know the Rays are not your typical Rays, but what a freaking debut for Scott, man. And what a story for Scott, who is a college reliever that has reinvented himself. You know the story a bit better than I do, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that needed to go back to the drawing board in regards to who he is as a pitcher. He came out the other side and he's got 6 2/3 a 1 run ball to his book in the big leagues through 1 turn.
And he was dominant, up until this point, and earned that opportunity to quickly debut. I think when, and there was a lot of buzz with him coming into the season after what he was doing in spring training, and also just being one of the better strikeout to walk guys last year. But I think some people kind of doubted, oh, does he have the breaking ball to be able to survive at the big league level? Because fastball changeup guys, it's so hard to, make that leap. And guys that get a lot of whiff off of deception, going to be a little bit harder to make that leap. But we saw this guy not only add a sweeper, he's got a different slider as well that's harder with shorter break. It's almost more in this like slutterish type of pitch. And so he's got a harder version, a bigger sweeper, and he's still got the changeup in the fastball. Like that's a really impressive arsenal. And he's still that guy that's filling up the zone, Jack. So it's this combination that gives him, I think, such a high floor, even if the long ball, which we talked about on the call up, like even if the long ball bites him a little bit, it's always going to be a solo shot because he pounds his zone, doesn't give up many walks, and doesn't give up a ton of hits, honestly. It's just when they are hit, sometimes they're clipped high fastballs.
He immediately makes me want to watch more Mets games. And I was already interested in watching more Mets games. Like, again, I've kind of caught a little bit of Mets fever knowing that they are contending in a year that they were not supposed to be. And I was watching the Sevy starts, man. And now you've like locked me into 40% of your games with Sevy on the hill and with Christian Scott on the hill. And there are very, I think, few guys in the minor leagues where you can firmly stamp them and say, this guy gives you a better chance to win a baseball game than a guy that's currently on your roster. And the Mets, again, they were off to a good start, but Christian Scott objectively makes the New York Mets a better team and a better pitching staff.
I love that you said that because I kind of caught myself when I was writing up this week in minor league baseball that we're going to be doing on the call ups YouTube every single week. Just I'll be running you down on everything that's been happening in minor league baseball and with highlights, and really excited to be doing that with Peyton. So be sure to look out for that on Monday evening. But when I was writing everything down from that, I realized this is like the third time that I've said the Mets got better from calling him up. And I think it's because it's so true. We love to pretend, oh, this prospect can plug in and be a jolt. And they bring him up for a reason because it's worth a shot. See if he connects. And if not, you can have him work through it or you send him back down.
Right.
But like you said, with Scott, I just felt so confident that even if he's not performing to the best of his ability, he gives them a quality or at least a chance, a quality starter or at least a chance every fifth day. I think just with the way he is built already, which says a lot about him. And that's why he was a preseason top 100 guy for us.
For sure. Like I heard the conversation surrounding Skeens versus Bailey Falter at the beginning of the year. It's like, oh, how's Bailey Falter going to break camp in this rotation and Skeens isn't? Well, like you're right. Like Skeens would have given them an objectively better opportunity to win. But there are so many prospects that we see come up. And we're going to talk about one in a moment in Mason Black, who's been throwing really well in Sacramento. But man, like who's to say he gives them a better opportunity than Ryan Walker starting a bullpen game? We just don't know that. But in the Mets situation, I think it was very unique where we truly knew it. When we saw the worst of Christian Scott because he was allowing a bunch of solo homers and
Mhm.
still had an ERA in the low threes. So I think there are fewer guys than the general baseball audience wants to stamp as immediate improvements, but Scott is one of those immediate improvements.
Yeah, even us too. I think there's always times where I'm like, oh,
100%.
I think he can do it because I want to be positive. And
For
again,
sure.
Mesa Black's worth a shot right away. And I think he has a good chance to help them, but he also has some command inconsistencies, so he might not. So those are the instances where you want to believe it, but it's always worth a chance and checking them out because you talked about the Giants bullpen. They wear them out a lot during the season. So even being able to get Black out there and if he can give you 5, 6 innings, even if they're not dominant, I think it's nice to get that, added to the fold considering how much they use Ryan Walker and some of these other guys, in the bullpen.
So is Ryan Walker, quickly before we kind of get the 411 on Mason Black, is Ryan Walker one of your favorite relievers in baseball now too? Like he's one of mine, if not my favorite. He's on the hill all the time, and he's opening games. He's throwing the eighth inning in games. He is so ridiculously unique. Are you okay if I were to outwardly stamp the Just Baseball Show as a pro Ryan Walker podcast?
Oh no, I'm absolutely okay with that.
Okay.
I'm in on any of these Swiss Army knife type of arms that just so many pitchers are so particular
Yeah.
and just need things a certain way and need their to have everything set up kind of the same way. And then you have the guys like Ryan Walker that let you just kind of throw them around in any which way, and they're going to just be solid and useful no matter what kind of role you put them in. And it's not faulting the other types of that's most pitchers. And I get it because you have to be so routine oriented. But I love the haphazard guys that can just go out there and throw no matter what kind of situation you put them in.
And it's something about 95 being so weird, and yet he's only walked four in 17 innings. Like he doesn't make sense to me, which is why I like him and why I watch every time. Like I'm still not sure about you, but like you're all right, you know that.
Yeah.
Um, Give me the 411 on Mason Black. So this guy, awesome for him, gets to debut in Philly. He's from Scranton. He went to Lehigh, which is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Mason Black so far this year in six AAA starts, 26 and two-thirds innings. He's 2-1 with a 101 ERA, three earned runs in 26 and two-thirds, 29 punchouts and eight walks. That in the PCL doesn't make sense. Try and make it make sense for me right now. Go.
I mean, he's funky. And I think, we're talking about Ryan Walker and the funky release and having some sync to what he's got going on there. It's not the same thing, but it's a really unique release from him. And I think the different angles that he can create, getting a ton of horizontal run, then he'll surprise you a little bit with the four seamer up. And then he'll just kind of throw a bunch of different pitches going in a bunch of different directions at you. And I think that's part of what makes him so effective now that he started to kind of lock in on the zone a little bit better now. And so you're combining enough swing and miss, ground balls. And I think it's going to play really well in Oracle Park, even if he's not getting enough or as much of the swing and miss because of the way that he's able to just continue to get weak contact. And that's why he's even in the PCL been able to continue to churn out good starts because no matter where it is, the contact's so weak, it doesn't matter how hitter friendly the environment is.
Yeah. Another debut, real quick, before we wrap with rotations. Bad. Stephen Kwan on the IL. Hope Kwan gets healthy very quickly. That guy went, what, 67 plate appearances before getting hurt without punching out. He is ridiculous right now. Tip of the cap to you, Stephen Kwan, friend of the show. Damn, keep popping off when you get back, King. Kyle Manzardo is the corresponding move. Manzardo was a 40-man ad this offseason, I think, so he was technically recalled. No, he was just added to the 40-man. So he
Yeah.
was selected.
Hmm.
Kyle Manzardo is up. Kyle Manzardo is now a big leaguer. From Coeur d'Alene, don't forget, that's where Mark Few got hit with his DUI. 23-year-old from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, went to Washington State. I think, I mean, he was balling out there. He balled out through the Rays system. This guy had a 1043 OPS in 93 games between high A and double in 2022. 2023, he dealt with early injury, down year. Oh, is this guy even good? In 802 OPS in 97 games? Yes, he's really good. 29 games with Columbus at the AAA level so far this year. This guy's hitting 303 with a 642 slug. 10 doubles, 9 homers, 20 driven in 29 games, a 1017 OPS. We've talked about him time and time again on the call up. For people that may just be introduced to him this week, Kyle Manzardo is one of the better all around hitters that we've got in minor league baseball right now. And you're going to see that on full display.
Yeah, as you said, he's really mowed through every level, and it's been so cool to watch him progress from this great bat to ball guy, great approach, into a guy that can now slug a good deal too. And I think that was kind of the question with him: is you have a first base profile? Is there going to be enough power there? The exit velocities weren't great. Well, now they're great. He's got a 90th percentile so far this year of 106 miles an hour. For
Mm.
reference, MLB average is like a decimal point below 104. I think it's like 103.6. So if you're doing that with the way that he's still a plus to maybe even better than that hitter with a good approach, he's such a high floor bat that this is another guy that, even if there are some inconsistencies in the beginning, I feel very confident that if you leave him up there by the end of the year, he will have made the Guardians better, even if he's not achieving his ceiling. And the fact that he can elevate so consistently too, he's just a really well-rounded hitter. It's kind of exactly what you want to see out of a profile from a data standpoint. And now the numbers are really shining through too.
So best version of their lineup probably looks like Josh Naylor as the DH and Manzardo at first moving forward. Florial, what do you do there? You put him in center, Tyler Freeman to the bench?
I guess, right? And they can kind of mix and match different ways too. I'm curious who's a better defender of Manzardo and Naylor. Like, I haven't checked the Naylor defensive data lately, but I feel like they'll probably just interchange those guys. No, I don't think one's like far from the other.
I'm not sure, man. Like Naylor is, we know, a consistently net negative defender. I'm not sure if Manzardo's like a good
He's
first
fine.
base defender. Yeah, so he's fine. Like fine, maybe better than net negative, although I'm not sure. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm sure we see Naylor at first, Manzardo DHing, Manzardo at first, Naylor DHing, just kind of like keep both of them on their toes. Why not?
And gives them
So,
more power too, which is
for
the
sure.
most exciting part, because that's the one thing that they've continued to want to add.
How we've been asking them for like 4 years, and then as soon as you heard Stephen Kwan say it, like during spring training, we were like, "Oh, thank God!" And
Yeah.
now it really still isn't showing too well. But now you may get that influx in Manzardo, and shit, man, whatever you get from George Valera, I know he's back in Columbus right now. He
Ooh.
could. We'll see what happens there. Why not? Okay, two more rotations before we wrap here. I want to talk about the Mariners rotation for a little bit, and I want to talk about the Cubs rotation, and we can just kind of clump them together. The top four in Major League Baseball in terms of starter ERA at this point. Boston is number one. We've talked plenty about them. Oh, wow. Cutter Crawford's great. Tanner Houck has been great. Yeah, right. Like everybody, they've been awesome. Philly, we've talked a lot about them. Ranger, awesome. Wheeler, awesome. Like it goes on. But three and four are Seattle and the Cubs. And it's time they get their flowers. Seattle's been getting their flowers because of how ridiculously dominant they have been. Bryce Miller on Sunday against the Houston Astros allowed 4 earned runs in his start. That stopped a streak. That stopped a stretch of 21 consecutive starts where their starting pitchers allowed 2 earned runs or fewer. In 21 starts before that, they allowed 20 total earned runs, fewer than an earned run per start for 3 whole weeks. You account for off days, they nearly went a month without allowing more than 2 earned in the starting rotation. And oh, mind you, they did this without Brian Wu. They did this with Castillo, who got off to a rough start before this stretch. They did it with Gilbert, who's pitching like one of the best pitchers in baseball. They did it with Kirby, who's pitching like one of the best pitchers in baseball. They did it with Bryce Miller, who has found a new level to him. And they're
Uh-huh.
doing it with Emerson Hancock, who has been survive and advance. Is the
Yeah.
ERA in the mid fours? Sure. But you know what? He's taking shots on the chin and he's getting through these starts with 2 or fewer earned runs. Hell of a run, Seattle. Damn.
I mean, imagine if their offense was performing to the way that, we think it can. They're 22nd in WRC plus right now, and they're still a team that's in a great position. It just edged out the Rangers and now are in first place in the AL West. I know it's early, but that's pretty exciting considering Julio Rodriguez isn't hitting. JP Crawford's out. You could point at several different players in the lineup and say they're not really hitting the way that we were hoping. So that stretch is awesome because you know that it's not going to be like that the entire year. And hopefully by the time your pitching maybe cools off a tad, you have those bats heating back up and you could try to level out that stretch. But I mean, dude, that's what we expected out of the Mariners staff. I think the Cubs is the more surprising side, but it's been so cool to watch both.
The Mariners, like the thing about the Mariners to me, the Cubs we were not talking about as one of the best rotations in baseball, and they happen to be. The Mariners, we were saying, yeah, they're one of the best rotations in baseball, but they're probably 3 or 4 coming into the year. We didn't think they were better than the Braves. We didn't think they were better than the Dodgers. At this point, like you have to look at that front three, maybe even front four, if you add Bryce Miller to the fold. You have to look at the front three of Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert as the best three-headed monster in baseball in any starting rotation. And you have to look at that front four as one of those that if they get into October, they can beat you 1-0 4 games in a row and go to the ALCS or World Series.
Yeah, and they can ride the hot hand too.
Yeah.
Like you could justify putting any of those guys in almost any spot if they're pitching, at the best of their ability. And then you're seeing it with Bryce Miller with the adjusted arsenal. I mean, when this guy's on, he has no hit stuff. Like it wouldn't be surprising to see him toss a no hitter now with the different ways that he can get whiffs, and then just always having that rising fastball that is rare. Like it's a rare level of ride that he creates. That's always going to be the get out of jail free card, and also set everything else up. Having Woo now back into the equation too. I mean, there's no better 5-man rotation in baseball, in my opinion. I don't think you could say that, especially if you add Hancock as the sixth, who, as you said, has been serviceable. Is there any rotation you're taking over that?
No,
No.
not a single one. Especially with Strider out. That's the thing. If Strider was healthy, I'd be like, that rotation in Atlanta is really good. And, sales look good this year. But man, like with Strider out, it's really no question in my mind.
Yep,
So
I agree.
the one that is the surprise, I think, is Justin Steele, friend of the program. By the way, happy Justin Steele Day. He's back today. Justin Steele may be the 4 for the Cubs. Shota Imanaga through 6 starts has a .78 ERA, 34 and 2/3, 3 earned runs, 35 punchouts, 4 walks. You've got Jamison Tyone off the shelf, 4 starts, a 1.13 ERA in 24 innings. Steele had a 1.93. But Javier Assad, again, man, this guy's on a different planet right now. 7 starts, 38 innings. He's 3-0 with a 1.66 ERA. How about this from Marquis? Since his major league debut, when Assad debuted at the end of 2022, he's tied for the 3rd lowest ERA in Major League Baseball among starting pitchers, with a minimum of 125 innings. Javier Assad and Shohei Ohtani are at a 2.59. Sonny Gray's at a 2.57. Kershaw's at a 2.24. Javier Assad, we've had this conversation before, and I think Ethan Badowski is the guy that kind of started it in the group text. He said, is Will Smith the best player that the casual baseball fan doesn't know? I think everybody knows Will Smith. I think the best baseball player that the casual fan doesn't know now is Javier Assad in Chicago.
That might be fair, and I think he's going to start to get like a cult following just because of the way that he gets his outs on the mound, and you see the way he looks, and he looks like any other guy, which I love, and he's just so freaking talented. And I think if they make the playoffs, he starts pitching on a bigger stage, people are going to really fall in love with the way that he pitches and just what he does out there.
You remember in shorter spurts, he was up to 97 in the World Baseball Classic.
Were you with me when in the time I was in Pensacola and I saw Assad? Was that the time you were out there with me?
No, I texted you after he started for Iowa in Indy. I was like, who is this motherfucker?
So, dude, I'll never forget it. I went out to Pensacola because I visit Griff every single year, and it was perfect timing when Mervis was in town.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, sweet. I'll come out that weekend, go out and watch the series. And I was like, okay, well, there's not really much pitching on the Cubs side I'm looking forward to seeing. And I see this guy, that Javier Assad, that's on the bump today. And I literally remember looking at Griff and saying, oh, you should have a good game today. And Assad pieced them up. And if you looked at prospect lists, like he was not ranked really like anywhere.
Nowhere to be found.
And I mean, I like to think I know who most of these guys are. I really had no clue who he was. And I was like, was he throwing like 6 different pitches? And Griff was like, dude, I think there was like 7. And he's like, none of them are insanely good, but like, how do you prepare for 7? And he puts them wherever he wants. And and I just started following him from there. And then you texted me about him, and I'm like, no way. He like stood out to Jack too out of nowhere. And here we are. Like, this is an example of people might not take you seriously. And that's why I love the org guy stories. He wasn't an org guy, but there's been stories of that too. David Schneider was an org guy that
For sure.
nobody took seriously. He played once a week in high A. If you perform, you can force your way up. It might be a longer path, it might be more difficult, but if you perform, you can kind of fulfill your own destiny one way or another, even if there's more detours than the guy that got a bigger signing bonus. I don't think anyone took Assad seriously, even through some of the success at the big league level. It was kind of like, oh, when's it going to run out? And now I think it's finally gotten to the point over the last few months that everybody's realized this ain't running out.
No. I think I realized he was special the day after he started, and I was like, oh, this guy's got something to him. He was leading a group of like 4 or 5 guys on Lime scooters, the Lime or Bird scooters.
Mm-hmm.
They were scooting through Indianapolis. They were almost doing like a scooter tour, and I was on my way to the ballpark, and it was like early morning. For some reason, I needed to be there at like 9:30, 10 a.m. for a 7 o'clock first pitch. I was like going to go home a little bit later. And Assad was just out there, and it was like 4 guys kind of butterflied to his right and left, and he was leading the charge on a Lime scooter parade. And I was like, you know what? You're going to be awesome. So I'll credit that to Javier Assad's ascension, his Lime scooter leadership in Indianapolis.
That's like the opposite of that terrible football movie, Draft Day, where like they don't take the quarterback who is like the best of all time, apparently, because no one showed up to his birthday party. It's like
I
the
never
opposite
watched
of
it.
that.
Never
It's
watched
yeah, yeah. Don't you don't need to. Not worth it. Also, Assad signed for $150,000
it. Come on.
from Mexico. So just it's not zero. It's not one of those like Framber Valdez stories, but he's definitely not a guy that's going to get a priority through the minor leagues when he's not throwing 98 out of the gate. He started to throw really hard, and that part's cool. But it's just been really fun to see.
100%. All right, get all your merch. We were pumping out excellent editorial stuff day after day after day. Can't wait for your video tonight. Minor League Roundup. You and Peyton Guinness have done a phenomenal job on that. Great stuff across the entire Just Baseball Podcast Network. Doggy Bandana, go do that, or you hate this company. Stealing a line from Peter. And Peter and I will talk to you tomorrow.